The title of this video is Naming Acids. The first thing you need to do when naming an acid is identify it as an acid. These are the five formulas of acids, and what they all have in common is they begin with hydrogen. In fact, all acids begin with hydrogen. At least at this level of learning, all acids, their formulas are going to begin with hydrogen. You may also notice a difference, that some of them contain oxygen and some of them do not. There are two different naming systems for naming acids, and we depend on whether they have oxygen or not to determine which naming system to use. So, to review very quickly, to be an acid they have to start with hydrogen, and whether they contain oxygen or not will be important to which naming system to use. First, we're going to learn how to name acids that do not have oxygen. You're probably already familiar with HCl, and it's called hydrochloric acid. The element besides the hydrogen that is involved is chlorine. And we're going to use chlorine, at least part of chlorine's name, to name the acid. Well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. All acids that do not contain oxygen will begin with the prefix hydro and end with the suffix ic, and then end with acid. So we need to know which part of chlorine to keep and put it in the blank, and we'll have the name of our acid. In general, you're going to get rid of the last three letters. And so you would see we would put the CHLOR, and that's exactly what's underlined here, the CHLOR. It becomes hydrochloric acid. So, to name acids that do not contain oxygen, we're going to use this general guideline, or this general naming system. They will all start with hydro, end in ic, and then we'll tack on the word acid. And we're going to fill in the blank with what other element hydrogen is with. Let's try another example. Actually, two more examples. This is HF and HCN. HF, well, I guess we're already named here. I got a little ahead of myself. HF has as a second element FLOURINE. And as I said in the screen before, we're going to use the hydro and then end in ic. What part of the name of fluorine do I keep? I get rid of the last three letters, and those are the letters you see right here, and it becomes hydrofluoric acid. The acid at the bottom here, HCN, this is a little different. Most of these acids that do not contain oxygen only have two elements, hydrogen and one other. This does not. It has actually three elements, but it still uses a general naming system. But this time I need to know what CN's name is. Now CN is actually a polyatomic ion. And I'm going to go to this chart of polyatomic ions and find it right here. CN minus is called cyanide. So back to the slide we were on. Let me type cyanide here. C-Y-A-N-I-D-E, cyanide. So what part of cyanide am I going to get rid of? Well, the last three letters. I'll put that C-Y, oops, don't mean to move that. I'll put that C-Y-A-N right here. And you see it fits into the naming system, hydro blank ic acid. Binary acids are named using that naming system. Here's two more. HI. I have the hydro and the ic. I have everything ready here. All we need to do is plug in the right letters. Well, the other letter besides hydrogen is iodine. I'm going to get rid of the last three letters, and I'll tack them in here. IOD. Get rid of the blanks. And this becomes hydroiodic acid. Hydroiodic acid. If you get real frustrated in this naming system, you can refer to it as hydroidiotic acid. We have one more example here of naming these acids that do not contain oxygen. The element here, besides hydrogen, is sulfur. Sulfur is a little bit different than the other elements. We don't get rid of the last three letters. In fact, for sulfur, because it doesn't end in an IDE or an INE, we put the whole word in, SULFUR, and I will get rid of the blank lines, and it becomes hydrosulfuric acid. However, many times in some books they get rid of the UR and it becomes hydrosulfic acid. Both are completely accepted, but sulfur is somewhat of an oddity in that it doesn't end in the INE that most elements end in, or IDE. Let's go on to a new slide. Now we're going to name acids that contain oxygen. And at first it's going to seem a little bit more complicated, but it's really not too bad. These acids are called oxyacids because they contain oxygen. They usually have three elements: hydrogen, oxygen, and one other element. All of them are named using this chart. If I know the name of the anion, the negative ion, I then move to the right on this chart and I find out the name of the acid. So let's try one. I need to know what SO3 is called. Well, if I go back to my polyatomic ion chart, SO3 is called sulfite. Sulfite. And if you look here, SO3 I've typed is called sulfite. The anion, the negative ion's name is sulfite. Well, sulfite has no prefix, but it ends in ITE, so it's this third one down. The acid, then, if we go straight across, will end in OUS. And I already taught you how to put the letters in. In fact, we just did sulfur. Remember I told you you could write the whole word? That becomes sulfurous acid. Or you can, if you want, get rid of the UR. So SULF. This acid is both known as sulfurous and sulfous acid. The top one is more common, called sulfurous acid. Let's go now to this acid. And I got a little ahead of myself. Let's actually get rid of this name. Very similar to the one that we just looked at, but this time it's SO4 instead of SO3. SO4, if we look back on the polyatomic ion chart, SO4 is called sulfate. Sulfate. Sulfate ends in 8. And you can see right here, it ends in 8, has no prefix. So the acid is going to end in ic. What part of sulfur do I keep? Well, the whole thing if I want. Or as I told you before, I can get rid of the U and the R and the U and get SULF. So this acid can be called sulfuric acid. It's a very common acid. The most common industrial acid used in the world, or sulfic acid. It can go by either name. Let's try another one. This acid, HClO. Well, I know it's an acid that starts with a hydrogen. I know it's an oxyacid, so I know I need to use this chart. I now need to know what ClO is called. What is that anion's name? You can see I named it, I've typed it here, but let's go back to the chart just to make sure that you know where to find it. ClO is right here, ClO. It's called hypochlorite. Hypochlorite. And I've typed it here. Hypochlorite is the name of the anion. Hypochlorite begins with the prefix hypo and ends in ite. It's the last one here. So my acid is going to begin with hypo and end in us. All I need to do is put in the right letters. What are those right letters? Well, CHLOR. We got rid of the ite, the ITE, the last three letters, and this becomes hypochlorous acid. Hypochlorous acid. Well, we just got one more example left, this one. Again, you see it's an acid that starts with a hydrogen and it's an oxyacid. And all these oxyacids are going to be named according to this system here on top. It's an oxyacid. So what do we call it? Well, we need to know what C2H3O2 is called. We'll go back to the chart, and I think it's over here. C2H3O2 is called acetate. Acetate. So acetate has no prefix, but it ends in ate. So the acid should end in ic. So let me type in. Well, I went ahead and just typed in the name of the polyatomic ion. It was called acetate. And we said that the ate turns into an ic. So the name of this acid is called acetic acid. In common terms, it's called vinegar. Also on this slide I have how to name acids that do not have oxygen in them. Those were simple. Those are start with hydro and ended in ic. So with these two charts, you should be able to name all acids. Acids start with hydrogen. Some of them have oxygen, which you'll use the top arrow for, and some of them do not, which you'll use the bottom arrow. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.